Hello friends! Today we're going to read the last two chapters of our book, Sarah, Plain and Tall. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing my AirPods, it's because it has a microphone in it so that you can hear my voice a lot better. Otherwise you hear the echo from the room. So I'm not listening to somebody else, I'm just using it for the microphone. Okay, so here we go, Sarah, Plain and Tall, chapter 8 and 9. And today we're going to find out, what is Sarah going to decide? Is she going to stay in Kansas or does she want to go back to Maine? Because she misses her brother and her aunts and the sea. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, chapter 8. The rain came and passed, but strange clouds hung in the northwest, low and black and green. The air grew still. In the morning, Sarah dressed in a pair of overalls and went to the barn to have an argument with Papa. She took apples for Old Bess and Jack. "Women don't wear overalls," said Caleb, running along behind her like one of Sarah's chickens. "This woman does," says Sarah crisply. Papa stood by the fence. "And I want to learn how to ride a horse," Sarah told him. "And then I want to learn how to drive a wagon all by myself." Jack leaned over and nipped at Sarah's overalls. She fed him an apple. Caleb and I stood behind Sarah. "I can ride a horse, I know," said Sarah. "I rode once when I was 12, and I will ride Jack." Jack was Sarah's favorite. Papa shook his head. "Not Jack. Jack is sly." Sly means kind of tricky and not very trustworthy. "I am sly too," said Sarah stubbornly. Papa smiled. He said, nodding, "but not Jack." "Yes, Jack," Sarah said in a very loud voice. "I can teach you how to drive a wagon. I have already taught you how to plow. And then I can go to town by myself." "Say no, Papa," Caleb whispered beside me. "That's a fair thing, Sarah," said Papa. "We will practice." A soft rumble of thunder sounded. Papa looked up at the clouds. "Today? Can we begin today?" asked Sarah. "Tomorrow is best," said Papa, looking worried. "I have to fix the house roof because a portion of it is loose and there's a storm coming." "We," said Sarah. "What?" Papa turned. "We will fix the roof together," said Sarah. "I've done it before. I know about roofs, and I am a good carpenter. Remember, I told you." There was thunder again, and Papa went to get the ladder. "Are you fast?" he asked Sarah. "I am fast and I am good," said Sarah. And they climbed the ladder to the roof. Sarah with wisps of hair around her face, her mouth full of nails. Overalls like Papa's. Overalls that were Papa's. Caleb and I went inside to close the windows. We could hear the steady sound of hammers pounding on the roof overhead. "Why does she want to go to town by herself?" asked Caleb. "To leave us?" I shook my head, weary with Caleb's questions. Tears gathered at the corner of my eyes, but there was no time to cry, for suddenly Papa called out, "Caleb! Anna!" We ran outside and saw a huge cloud, horribly black, moving toward us over the north fields. Papa slid down the roof, helping Sarah after him. "A squall!" he yelled to us. He held up his arms and Sarah jumped off the porch roof. "Get the horses inside," he ordered Caleb. "Get the sheep, Anna, and the cows. The barn is the safest." So what's happening here is a squall is coming, and a squall is another way to say storm. It looks like there's going to be a storm with thunderclouds, with rain, and with wind. So they're trying to get everybody safe. The grasses flattened. There was a hiss of wind and a sudden pungent smell. Our faces looked yellow in the strange light. Caleb and I jumped over the fence and found the animals huddled by the barn. I counted the sheep to make sure they were all there and herded them into the large stall. A few raindrops came, gentle at first, and then stronger and louder, so that Caleb and I covered our ears and stared at each other without speaking. Caleb looked frightened and I tried to smile at him. Sarah carried a sack into the barn. Her hair was wet and streaming down her neck. Papa came behind, Lottie and Nick with him. Their ears were flat against their heads. "Wait!" cried Sarah. "My chickens!" "No, Sarah," Papa called after her, but Sarah had already run from the barn in the sheet of rain. My father followed her. The sheep nosed open their stall door and milled around the barn, bleeding. Nick crept under my arm, and a lamb, Maddie with the black face, stood close to me, trembling. There was a soft paw on my lap, and then a gray body. It was Seal. And then, as the thunder pounded, the wind rose, and there was a terrible crackling of lightning close by. Sarah and Papa stood in the barn doorway, wet to the skin. Papa carried Sarah's chickens, and Sarah came in with an armful of summer roses. Sarah's chickens were not afraid, and they settled like small red bundles in the hay. Papa closed the door at last, shutting out some of the sounds of the storm. The barn was eerie and half-lighted. Like dusk without a lantern, Papa spread blankets around our shoulders, and Sarah unpacked a bag of cheese and bread and jam. At the very bottom of the bag were Sarah's shells. Caleb got up and went over to the small barn window. "What color is the sea when it storms?" He asked Sarah. "Blue," said Sarah, brushing her wet hair back with her fingers. "And gray and green." Caleb nodded and smiled. "Look," he said to her. "Look what is missing from your drawing." Sarah went to stand between Caleb and Papa by the window. She looked a long time without speaking. Finally, she touched Papa's shoulder. "We have squalls in Maine too," she said. "Just like this. It'll be all right, Jacob." Papa said nothing, but he put his arm around her and leaned over to rest his chin on her hair. I closed my eyes, suddenly remembering Mama and Papa standing that way. Mama was smaller than Sarah, and her hair fair against Papa's shoulder. When I opened my eyes again, it was Sarah standing there. Caleb looked at me and smiled until he could smile no more. We slept in the hay all night, waking when the wind was wild, sleeping again when it was quiet. And at dawn, there was a sudden sound of hail, like stones tossed against the barn. We stared out the window, watching the ice marbles bounce on the ground. When it was over, we opened the barn door and walked into the early morning light. The hail crunched and melted beneath our feet. It was white and gleaming as far as we looked, like sun on a glass, like the sea. And here is the last chapter, chapter 9. It was very quiet. The dogs leaned down to eat the hailstones. Seal stepped around them and leapt up on the fence to groom herself. A tree was blown over near the cow pond, and the wild roses were scattered on the ground as if a wedding had come and gone there. "I'm glad I saved an armful," was all that Sarah said. Only one field was badly damaged, and Sarah and Papa hitched up the horses and plowed and replanted during the next 2 days. The roof had held. "I told you I know about roofs," Sarah told Papa, making him smile. Papa kept his promise to Sarah, and when the work was done, he took her out into the fields. Papa was riding Jack, who was sly, and Sarah was riding Old Bess. Sarah was quick to learn. "Too quick," Caleb complained to me as we watched from the fence. He thought a moment. "Maybe she'll fall off, and then she'll have to stay here, right?" "But why?" said Caleb. "Why does she have to go away alone?" "Hush up, Caleb," I said crossly. "Hush up." "I could get sick and then make her stay," said Caleb. "No." "We could tie her up," said Caleb. "No." Caleb began to cry, and I took him inside the barn where we could both cry. Papa and Sarah came to hitch the horses to the wagon so Sarah could practice driving. Papa didn't see Caleb's tears and sent him with an axe to begin chopping up the tree by the pond for firewood. I stood and watched Sarah, the reins in her hands, Papa next to her in the wagon. I could see Caleb standing by the pond, one hand shading his eyes, and he was watching too. I went into the safe darkness of the barn then. Sarah's chickens scuttled along behind me. "Why?" I asked out loud, echoing Caleb's questions. The chickens watched me. Their eyes were small and bright. The next morning, Sarah got up early and put on her blue dress. She took apples to the barn and loaded the bundle of hay onto the wagon for Old Bess and Jack. And she put on her yellow bonnet. "Remember Jack," said Papa, "a strong hand." "Yes, Jacob." "Best to come home before dark," said Papa. "Driving a wagon is hard if there's no full moon." "Yes, Jacob." Sarah kissed us all, even my father, who looked surprised. "Take care of Seal," she said to Caleb and me. And with a whisper to Old Bess and a stern word to Jack, Sarah climbed up in the wagon and drove away. "Very good," murmured Papa as he watched. and after a while he turned and went out into the fields. Caleb and I watched Sarah from the porch. Caleb took my hand and the dogs lay down beside us. It was sunny, and I remembered another time when a wagon had taken Mama away. It had been a day just like this, and Mama never came back. Seal jumped to the porch, her feet making a small thump. Caleb leaned down and picked her up and walked inside. I took the broom and slowly swept the porch. Then I watered Sarah's plants. Caleb cleaned out the wood stove and carried the ashes to the barn, spilling them so that I had to sweep the porch again. "I am loud and pesky," Caleb cried suddenly. "You said so. And she has gone to buy a train ticket to go away." "No, Caleb, she would have told us." "This house is too small," said Caleb. "That's what it is." "The house is not too small," I said. I looked at Sarah's drawing of the fields pinned up on the wall next to the window. "What is missing?" I asked Caleb. "You said you knew what was missing." "Colors," Caleb said wearily. "The colors of the sea." Outside, clouds moved into the sky and went away again. We took lunch to Papa, cheese and bread and lemonade. Caleb nudged me. "Ask him. Ask Papa." "What has Sarah gone to do?" I asked. "I don't know," said Papa. He squinted at me, and then he sighed and put one hand on Caleb's head and one on mine. "Sarah is Sarah. She just does things her own way, you know." "I know," said Caleb very softly. Papa picked up his shovel and put on his hat. "Ask if she's coming back," whispered Caleb. "Of course she's coming back," I said. "Seal is here." But I would not ask the question. I was afraid to hear the answer. We fed the sheep, and I set the table for dinner. 4 plates. The sun dropped low over the west fields. Nick and Lottie stood at the door wagging their tails asking for supper. Papa came to light the stove, and then it was dusk. Soon it would be dark. Caleb sat on the porch steps, turning his moon snail shell over and over in his hand, and Seal brushed back and forth against him. Suddenly, Lottie began to bark, and Nick jumped off the porch and ran down the road. "Dust!" cried Caleb. He climbed the porch and stood on the roof. "Dust and a yellow bonnet!" Slowly, the wagon came around the windmill and the barn and the windbreak and into the yard, the dogs jumping happily beside it. "Hush, dog," said Sarah. And Nick leapt up into the wagon to sit by Sarah. Papa took the reins and Sarah climbed down from the wagon. Caleb burst into tears. "Seal was so very worried," said Caleb. Sarah put her arms around him and he wailed into her dress. "And the house is too small. And we thought, and I am loud and pesky." Sarah looked at Papa and me over Caleb's head. "We thought you might be thinking of leaving us," I told her, "because you miss the sea." Sarah smiled. "No," she said. "I will always miss my old home, but the truth of it is, I would miss you more." Papa smiled at Sarah, and then he bent quickly to unhitch the horses from the wagon. He led them to the barn for water. Sarah handed me a package. "For Anna," she said, "and Caleb, for all of us." The package was small, wrapped in a brown paper with a rubber band around it. Very carefully, I unwrapped it, Caleb peering closely. Inside were 3 colored pencils. "Blue," said Caleb slowly, "and gray and green." Sarah nodded. Suddenly, Caleb grinned. "Papa," he called. "Papa, come quickly. Sarah has brought the sea." We ate our night meal by candlelight, the 4 of us. Sarah has brought candles from town, and nasturtium seeds for her garden, and a book of songs to teach us. It is late, and Caleb is nearly sleeping by his plate, and Sarah is smiling at my father. Soon there will be a wedding. Papa says that when the preacher asks if he will have Sarah for his wife, he will answer, "Aye." Autumn will come, then winter, cold with the wind that blows like the wind off the sea in Maine. There will be nests of curls to look for, and dried flowers all winter long. When there are storms, Papa will stretch a rope from the door to the barn, so we will not be lost when we feed the sheep, the cows, and Jack, and old Bess. And Sarah's chickens if they aren't living in the house. There will be Sarah C., blue and gray and green, hanging on the wall, and songs, old ones and new, and Seal with the yellow eyes. And there will be Sarah, plain and tall. And that is the end of our book. So now let's go through the questions for chapter 8 and 9 from Sarah, Plain and Tall. Why does Sarah want to learn how to drive the wagon and a horse? Why didn't she learn how to do this in Maine? Question number 2. Why does Anna get upset when Caleb asks her why Sarah wants to go to town? What do you think? Number 3. How do you think Sarah might have been different from other women who lived on the farms? And then one more question. What clues do we have that Anna misses her mother? What clues, what kind of things happen in the story that gives us the idea that Anna misses her mother? Okay, and then the questions from chapter 9. What damage does the storm do to the environment? What damage does the storm do to the farm and the house where they live? Number 2, why does Caleb and Anna, why do they think that Sarah might not return from town? How is Caleb and Anna's life different from your life? What are all the differences between Caleb and Anna's life and your life? Number 4, what does Sarah purchase in town and why does she make this purchase? Do you remember? Why did she go into town and why did she buy those things? Why do you think she bought those things? Okay, so here we have the questions. Number 1 from chapter 8. Why does Sarah want to learn how to drive a wagon? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. You can come up with a lot of different reasons. She wanted to be able to go places by herself. In Maine, she never learned how to ride a horse or drive a wagon because she said she lived close enough that she can walk everywhere. So she never really had to learn how to ride a horse or use a wagon. Okay? Why does Anna get upset when Caleb asks her why Sarah goes to town? Well, she gets upset because it brings back these feelings of fear that she thinks Sarah might leave them. And she doesn't like to think about that. And every time Caleb asks her a question, it's forcing her to remember and to be afraid because she doesn't know what's going to happen. Number 3, how do you think Sarah was different from women who lived on farms in the past? Well, I don't think that a lot of women who lived on farms or that lived in that time over 100 years ago, they didn't wear pants. And Sarah just put on the overalls and said, I'm going to go and I'm going to help you do the work. I'm going to help you plow. I'm going to help you fix the roof. I'm going to help you do this and that. And a lot of women didn't do those things. Maybe they were afraid, or maybe they thought they would just take care of things in the house. But Sarah was different and she was brave. And so that made her really different from other people, other women that lived back then. And the question number 4 said, what clues do you have that Anna misses her mother? Well, she thinks about her mother often and she remembers the way Mama used to do things. And also it said that she remembers the way Papa used to be with her mama. She has all these memories. And it probably had been a long, long time since Mama had died and she didn't really see Papa around another woman. So she was remembering all of these things. Now, when that storm comes, it creates some damage. Do you remember? Some of the damage it did was damaging the tree and making the tree fall over and then scattering all those roses and their petals everywhere. And it badly damages only one of their fields. But nothing bad happened to the barn or the house or the roof that Papa and Sarah fixed together. And so that was really good news. Why do Caleb and Anna think that Sarah will not return when she goes into town? They have this fear that Sarah wants to go away. And they think she's going into town either to buy a train ticket or to actually get on the train and just leave. They're afraid that she doesn't want to stay with them. How is Caleb and Anna's life different from yours? Well, you're the only one who can answer that one because you're the only one that can compare Anna and Caleb's life to yours. When Sarah goes into town, What does she do? She makes a purchase. She buys 3 colored pencils. She buys a blue. Oh, actually, this one's a blue. A blue. And she buys a gray. And she buys a green. And she wants to buy these because she wants to be able to add colors to her drawings. And she wants to have them for Anna and Caleb to be able to draw also. These are the colors of the sea. And she has decided that instead of going back to Maine and being by the sea, she's just going to bring the colors with her. Because she has decided that she would miss Anna and Caleb and Papa more than she misses the sea. So she decides to stay. And the awesome thing about this story is that it's based on a true story. It's based on a real lady who moved from the East Coast to the prairie to be a mama and to have a family. And this story was written by her great-great-great-grandniece, I believe it was. And so it's really nice to think that this really happened one day. There's also 3 other books that you can read that are coming after this. So if you want to find those other books, you can search Sarah Plain and Tall book series. And you will see there are 3 more. Skylark, Caleb's Story, and then I think the last one is called Grandpa's Song. And you can read what happens to these characters and if there's going to be any new members of the family. And I encourage you to look for the books and to read the next story. The continuation of the story, because it's really beautiful. Thank you for joining me on this Sarah Plain and Tall video. And I look forward to seeing you and sharing some new books with you. Bye.